Great. Perfect. So now that we're recording, let's get started. Why don't you tell us all a little bit about your project?
My project's called The Story of Emily Murphy. Um, I'll just tell you a quick overview of her and then I'll get into the story. Um, Emily was an author, a public and legal reformer, and the first female magistrate of the British Empire. She was in the famous wife who worked on the Person's case. And yeah, I'll say more in my presentation.
Amazing. So why don't you get started with your presentation then?
Emily was born March 14th, 1868 in Cookstown, Toronto. Her father, Isaac Ferguson, had his 2 daughters and 4 sons raised the same, which meant then that most parents, just because they got a girl, wouldn't let them go to school or learn the same education as a boy would. They'd be more encouraged to cook and to knit and stuff instead of, like, boys would do more of the education, but Emily's parents let her go to school and actually learn stuff. And so, yeah, she went to Bishop's Dance School in Toronto, the oldest independent and boarding school for girls. She missed her family there since it was a boarding school, but her brothers would sometimes come to visit. And once they brought along a man, Arthur Murphy, which she married in 1887. Now her property rights is what I'm talking about next is there's a story Emily heard that they could buy, the husband could buy or sell the property and the wife wouldn't have known about it. She could have ran off with the money. And Emily was working to get this better and less likely to happen. So she would fundraise and went to meetings, and in 1911 the wife got a third of her husband's land, even if the husband did not do so. Emily's authoring life, we're talking about next. It was possible. Emily liked to write in her diary, and Arthur liked to listen to her recite it. So she wrote lots, and then she decided to publish her books. And the inspiration for that was because she knows a lot of British people were publishing their books of what they thought about Canada. So she did that as well. But they weren't written under the name Emily Murphy. They were written under the name Janie Canuck because people made up their names instead of using their own for books. And someone made up one once called Johnny Canuck, so she made a female version, Janie Canuck. Her first book was entitled The Impressions of Janie Canuck Abroad. It was dedicated to my fellow traveler, La Padre, which is what she called Arthur. After she published her book, a paper company asked if she'd write articles on women's issues, so she did that too. Now, from a bright time in Emily's history, we have to go to a harder one, the hard time. Emily's family started to get sick, and Arthur got closer to death, so she started to write endlessly to support the family. But she too got sick, and the whole family struggled to survive. Her 6-year-old daughter, Doris, died. Everyone was recovered. It would sound good to come up with of the death, so they went out west, where Emily had a brother there, and they lived there for a while. Which was in Swan River, Manitoba. They got enough money to send their girls to college, and Emily reviewed books and was still sending paper articles to the paper company she worked for. And she helped do stuff like bring a hospital to the community and a lot more. It was time for them to move on after 4 years, and they were happy. They settled in Edmonton, Alberta. Though Emily did record her adventures in Swan River with a new book titled Janie Canuck in the West. This, down in Alberta, is how she became the first female magistrate of the British Empire. So, only men were allowed in court then, and women should be allowed in court, obviously. So she went up to the general authority and said that women should be allowed in court, or at least a separate court just for women. So women would be able to speak and be heard, as well as there'd be a woman magistrate. And The general jury agreed and offered Emily the job as a magistrate. So she was honored June 19th, 1916. But something bad came along with it not long after. Her first day in court, a man refused to take a case with her because she was not a person. Emily fought to fight this thing, and women were equal to men eventually in 1917, but she wanted to be a senator, but women weren't allowed into office. So she worked to change this law. She got people to sign a petition. 500,000 people did, but they did not change it. She worked for 10 years with no success to get the person's law changed. Then she heard that only 5 people could approach the court to get it changed. She chose 4 other women that had tried to change the person's law in the past: Irene Palmy, Louise McKinney, Nellie McClung, and Helena Mayer Edwards. And the law was changed October 18, 1929. After the prison case was won, she was a reformer for the public and changing laws. She died October 7th, 1933. And that's the end of my story part.
Amazing. Well, thank you. It looks like you've done a lot of research. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the sources that you used?
I mainly use a Canadian encyclopedia for it because I did get one book that I did mostly for like the person's case and stuff, and it was a book on the Famous Five by Penny Dowie. I used the pages of Emily Murphy that talks about her and the person's case.
Yeah. Nice. And I see that you have a little costume on. Do you want to tell us about that?
My mom's friend gave it to us, but
Nice. And out of the Famous Five, why did you choose Emily Murphy specifically?
I was gonna choose Nellie McClung, but I did decide to. I was looking at a few other ones, and other women who actually run the person's case, like Viola Desmond and other ones. But in the end, I chose Emily Murphy because she did a lot in her life to fight, like property rights and the person's case. Yeah.
Absolutely. Why do you think it's important for us in 2021 to learn about that?
Because we can vote and we have better property rights and we can be in court all because of her, and we couldn't have been before. So I think that's really important to remember. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what did you learn that was, the most interesting in your entire project process?
I liked how she would do writing books, because I like to write, and I thought she didn't write books at first because at first they just talk about so much about like what she did that was different, like an impact on the world, but that she just did this on her own time too, like writing books. I like.
Absolutely. And I know that in your presentation, which everyone can again go and see online in detail, you used those yellow highlights around the different boxes. Was there a reason you chose that color in particular?
I liked how it was brighter, and I didn't really like the other colors with the design, so I chose.
Nice.
And,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, it looks like you put a lot of hard work into the presentation. What was your favorite part of the entire process?
I liked writing stuff down and finding the information. I did end up enjoying putting it together. Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a bit of a hard time choosing the persons. So yeah, I like the research.
So about research, you mentioned that you used the Canadian Encyclopedia specifically, as well as that other book that you found. Did you come across any conflicting information between the two sources?
No, not really.
Okay, okay. And if you were to leave the audience with something about why you think that everyone should know about Emily Murphy and something that you haven't talked about yet in your presentation, what would it be?
I've talked about it mostly. I think I already said this, but about how much she did in her life.
Mhm.
Like she fought for 10 years just to get so we could vote and be in the office and other stuff. That she just did so much in her whole life to change it.
Absolutely. Well, I think that concludes our interview. Thank you so much for all the hard work you put in. You did a great job. So congratulations, Anna.
Thank you.
All right, great job, great project. Good job to all of the students.